happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 262 for June the 15th, 2022. My name is Wes Fryer, and I'm coming to you from Oklahoma City, where I haven't shaved for 3 days. Something like that, because I'm on summer break and it is lovely. And as a summer breaking teacher, I am delinquent in my duties to post our last episode. So I will assure those of you that are waiting with bated breath for the audio podcast version with show notes of episode 261 that it will be coming soon. Joining us and looking remarkably dry, given the amount of moisture that apparently is falling on the northern tier right now, or at least in Montana and Wyoming and Yellowstone and places like that. It's Dr. Jason Neiffer, who also I don't think has shaved in the last couple of days, but that's more of a norm for Jason, because when you live in Montana, you know, haircuts are optional and, you know, beards are smiled upon even more than they are here in Oklahoma. And we love them here, I guess, in Oklahoma. So.
It is true. I do have that kind of sort of mountain man look. And in fact, here in my flannel today with Glacier National Park in the background, I'm obviously giving that motif off. But yes, I am the executive director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School, located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in actually kind of sunny tonight, Missoula, which has not really been the case the last couple of weeks. It's been dropping rain there, as I'm sure many of you've seen on national headlines. And of course, all of our well wishes and thoughts go out to people impacted by the incredible events that are happening around Yellowstone National Park, in places like Gardner, Montana, and Red Lodge, Montana. Of course, schools we serve are located in that area. We've been checking in on our peeps in the region as well. But ignoring that breaking news for a moment, Wes, what is the EdTech Situation Room all about?
Well, it's the time when I just kind of show up without doing any homework, and Jason works all week frantically to fill our Google Doc with lots of great news articles. Actually, I I usually contribute, but I was I've been on vacation. Well, actually, you have been too. You've been in Oregon. You were in a cool place last week.
Yes.
So we are here to talk about the technology news and to shoot it through the educational prism. And Peggy George is here with us live, and we're so glad, Peggy, for you to be able to join us. And we want to invite anyone who has this time block open, although it will be changing. Actually, I could now say in the month of August, because, and I haven't even shared this on social media yet, Peggy might be excited to know we sold our house yesterday. So we are under contract. It was only on the market like 74 days. We changed our realtor and it sold in 3 days. So anyway, we're going to be moving to Charlotte, North Carolina. And, you know, Jason and I are, I'm sure, going to continue to share various and sundry personal items. But officially, we're here to talk about the technology news and especially how that relates to schools and education, but possibly also our personal lives. And we will try not to gush too much about Apple stuff, but, you know, sometimes it just happens. So, Dr. Neiffer, thank you for, again, doing the yeoman's work with our links tonight. We have categories tonight, including security, the tech correction, the EdTech correction, Google, Microsoft, Apple, software, and the infamous Geek of the Week. So we have a lot of tech correction, which we didn't get into a ton of last time. But where would you like to start, sir? Perhaps avoiding the rabbit hole of the tech correction for just a few moments. But I think we're going to fall into it tonight.
We definitely will fall into it tonight. Well, there's some kind of standard Microsoft, Apple, Google news that I think all this stuff is interesting to talk about. Let's start with Google. Kevin Topfold about Chromebooks reported on June 9th an interesting new feature headed into the direction headed into the interesting new feature headed to a Chrome operating system device near you, and that's partial split screen functionality. And right now in Windows 11, there is a kind of a new way it does window management. They kind of mimic some of the window manager apps that I've used over time. But essentially what it allows you to do is take a window, and instead of just putting it on one side or the other of your screen, you can actually split it in new and nuanced ways. So if you have a single screen, for example, and want to put a doc up on one side and a web page up on another, it's really easy to do that now in Microsoft's Windows Manager, and apparently Chrome will be headed in that direction too, starting in a future version of the operating system. And what I would say is that it's just becoming really obvious to me that there's a lot of time and attention going to making the Chrome operating system a power operating system, one that has features that would be very attractive to obviously very net connected but tech savvy users. So I'm excited that it's headed in that direction. And again, something that I actually install third-party plugins for on things like the Mac operating system.
I'll comment on that to say there are some shortcuts that you can use, both keyboard shortcuts and then Windows clicking shortcuts on the Chromebook to split screen. One of the places we've needed to do that has been creating narrated slideshow videos using Adobe Spark Video, which actually is not Adobe Spark anymore. I keep on saying it. It is Adobe CC Express, Adobe Creative Cloud Express. But just a fantastic tool, the one that I have my sixth graders do their culminating video projects in our conspiracy. It's actually called Fruit Loop Conspiracy Theories, but about the moon landings. One of the things that's challenging about it, though, and this is something to think about screen size wise, is like Adobe Creative Cloud Express, you can't compress the size of the window too much, or it actually says, hey, you've got to make this bigger, and it does not show you all of the tools. And so anyway, that was something, I don't know how many people run into that, where my students had a script in Google Docs, they needed to read it, and then they needed to record it over here. And the way that Adobe works with CC Express Video is you have to hold the mouse button down while you're recording. So anyway, this kind of split screen technology definitely has real applicability and need in the educational context. But even before this, there have been some ways to do that. It does kind of vary. It's also nice to have more than one screen, but that's not the situation for a lot of our younger students, particularly maybe once kids are getting into the upper middle school and high school, they may have a phone. That'll be something interesting to think about too. But I don't know. I don't know how many people are doing that, having scripts and things like that they need to record. But I did have many students successfully do that with split screening on the Chrome OS, and it seems like this is going to make that experience even better. So that's great.
Yep. And then related to that, other kind of updates in Google World, there's really three of them. We can do these in kind of quick succession. First, 9to5 Google reported on June 10th that the sharing dialog screen in Google Drive, so any drive that or any document you can share, has been updated to kind of improve the way you share documents. And of course, interesting to that is that it's really Google that created this concept, right? It was their enhancements to what used to be called Writely, an online word processor that they picked up and then made into Google Docs, and then started adding a wide variety of enhancements. The shared dialog screen has been very similar and again, quite functional for some time, and they are adapting that to make it more user-friendly. I noticed this before I saw the article. In fact, I was sharing documents the other day, so I know that the screen is now in place. But there is more ways that you can access some of the advanced features, like making it only open to a certain domain or making it open to the public with or without sign-in, for example, if you're using inside of domain. Those are all pieces that are easier to access now. So those are some interesting updates. The Google Keep, according to Chrome Unboxed today, will start allowing you to change the size of your fonts. There's some long-term plans for Google Keep to finally utilize text formatting to make that particular service more useful. Right now, it's really best for quick jotted notes because you can't even format the text right now, like including adding italics, underlines, bolds. But that is changing in the near future, and one of the first adaptations will be to allow for different size fonts. And then also, Google Drive has also announced that they are trying to put more functionality into the file manager inside of Google Drive. And one of the things that you can do now is like control copy, or I think it's called command copy on the Mac. Control copy or command copy a file name and paste it elsewhere. You can also press, I think it's Shift, or maybe it's a different familiar key. No, yeah, it's Control and Shift and V to put a shortcut to that file somewhere else in your Google Drive. So again, I feel like these are all power user typed commands that I think make this even that much more attractive to advanced users.
And these kind of things are wonderful to not only learn about ourselves and practice, but share with teachers back to school, right? They're always making different enhancements. And for those of us that are in Google Schools, we spend a ton of time in Google Drive and Google Docs and, in these tools. So these kinds of little enhancements or techniques, I think it's a perfect kind of thing to share in a back to school EdTech PD sort of situation.
Absolutely. So that's all the Google news. I will do a quick Microsoft one. And there might be a couple of mini rabbit holes under Apple. I know that when you wind up me and Wes, we can sometimes go on Apple stuff. But one quick Microsoft note. This was from the June 25th Verge. We've reported previously on this podcast that Microsoft was finally shutting down Internet Explorer. And now it's released an update that automatically redirects people that go to Internet Explorer to Microsoft Edge. And I believe they've also added a compatibility layer to Edge to make sure that it is going to be able to deal with some of the legacy things that were previously Internet Explorer only. But Internet Explorer finally dead, a long time coming, and now I guess long live Microsoft Edge.
And the article says that future versions of their OSs will actually disable entirely Internet Explorer. So I think that's excellent because from a security standpoint, you very much are putting yourself and others at risk when you are using a deprecated browser that is no longer secure and has many known vulnerabilities. But I think that may be unprecedented because we've never seen Apple do that. I don't know that we've ever seen an operating system manufacturer disable their browser. So again, that's also a sign of the times with Edge and the integration of Chromium and the fact that there's arguably less competition and actual choices in the web browser environment in terms of core engines and things like that as we had at one time in the past.
Absolutely. And then here's some random Apple news. I thought I would start up with the easiest things to talk about. First, the interesting announcement 9to5Mac had yesterday that the next entry-level iPad is coming with a couple of features that kind of give you a sense of the direction of Apple. The A14 chip, which is a newer offering from Apple, very fast desktop class chip. It will have 5G availability, which means they're going to put those pieces in there, and then also USB-C connectivity. I recently helped my parents purchase some entry-level iPads that were even a year or two old that we bought used versions on Swappa. And I felt like that both of them were very responsive platforms, like surprisingly responsive platforms that made it extremely easy to utilize most apps, even some of the ones that seem to be more graphic intensive.
Do you remember what generation you got? Because I actually just ordered an iPad on Swappa today too.
8th generation.
Oh, it's 8th. Okay,
no, 7th generation. Excuse me.
7th?
So two generations back.
Yeah, no, that's what we got too. We ordered a 7th.
Extremely reasonably priced. Both of them both that we purchased were obviously well below the retail price of a current generation, even entry level iPad, but still very useful.
Yeah, I got a 128 gig, $230. So
yeah,
that's a good price. I mean, and shipping and taxes, so a little more. But I think aren't you looking at 500 for a new one pretty much now? And that would be the low
end.
I
think so, yeah. The one thing I would say about the availability of the 5G on there is that I I'm just recently back in iPad world the last 2 years, and did end up upgrading to the newest iPad Air when it was released this past year. I guess it would have been earlier this year when I picked it up. But the thing that's super interesting about the that is that I love the 5G in there, and in fact, it's an extra $15 or $20 a month for a tablet SIM from T-Mobile as part of my larger internet plan. And what's super fascinating about the entry level one is that, especially if I could update the space to like 256 would be pretty close to what I'd be looking for. That's a very attractive iPad that. Yes, it may not have the super screen or the M1 chip in it that my current generation Air does, but to have the 5G access in there and the USB-C, it's a lot of advanced technology all packed into one.
I have another thought about iPads and phones and USB-C, but Peggy is commenting in the chat room that she spent the last few days participating in the Wakelet Community Week and saw excellent sessions, and it was a 12-hour live stream. So if there's anyone up to the challenge of a long web-based professional development, it is Peggy George. So if you all don't use Wakelet, I know a lot of people are big onto it. Carl Hooker was the one I think that first got me kind of connected, and I still kind of use Twitter as my place to save and share things and threads and stuff like that. But Wakelet is a great tool, and we'll put a link in our show notes to the Wakelet Community Week. And Peggy, let us know if those sessions are being archived or if it's you just have to tune in live. On the issue of USB-C, so as I've mentioned on the show, you just talked about that, Jason, in the next generation of the iPad, Apple had experimented with that with an iPad Pro. Gosh, I don't remember the name, but like it was about 3 years old. But that was the iPad that I've actually had as my daily carry iPad. I have a laptop too, a school laptop as well. But I really loved having USB-C because my single charger took care of my laptop. It took care of my iPad. Now, Shelly, my wife, just got for the first time ever a brand new iPhone. She got a 12, and she's always had hand-me-downs. We were figuring, and one of the cool things about the 12 is it has this. What's that? What is the charging called? Where you just set it on the thing, Jason? You remember what that is?
Wireless Qi charging.
There you go. So you don't have to plug it in. And so we were at Target today, and we picked up a wireless charger, which looks like a little disc. But interestingly, Apple doesn't give you a power brick with that. And so we're having to scramble around the house a little bit because we have lots of USB-A, charging bricks, but not as many USB-C now. So we're in the middle of this transition to USB-C, both for our laptop computers as well as now going to be the next generation of iPads. And I think then that's also coming for phones as well, because I think, the charging, like I said, the charging cable itself that came with this charging cable, it didn't have USB-A. It was a USB-C charger. So anyway, I'm glad to see that transition, but it's going to be a bit messy here in the in between because we may not have as many of the new devices as we need. But thankfully, you've got some cross compatibility. You never charged your laptop with your lightning cable, that came with your iPhone. But now that iPads are moving this direction, and I think that we'll see iPhones do that. There was an article, didn't we do something last week or the week before about Europe? Because aren't they mandating something about?
Yeah, in fact, that's my next article.
Okay,
Time
there you go.
Reports on June 7th. Great segue that Apple products are set to use common charging port after EU deal.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of coverage of this over the last couple of weeks, but this started a couple of years back when phones were required to be all on the same standard. And the way Apple got around that was throwing a USB-C to Lightning adapter to their to their boxes, and that was the way they were kind of compatible with that. Well, that's no longer going to do it, and now the European Union expects Apple to kind of head into this direction of being USB-C. Now, there's already been I've seen at least 10 references to expect either the iPhone 14 or the iPhone 15 to go all in on USB-C, which I also agree would be extraordinary. It does mean an awful lot of my good iPhone cables will be kind of worthless. In fact, I'm looking at one right now that I invested in a nice thick braided nylon a lightning cable that will become worthless when this is the case. But USB-C is very ubiquitous. I have plenty of chargers of those myself, and I think there's some pretty extraordinary advantages to the USB-C standard. It's still not perfect, as we talked about in the past, but obviously Apple will be heading in this direction. The fact that the entry-level iPad will likely go in that direction too is at least a sign to me that we can expect the iPhone, maybe even this year, to be USB-C.
And so here's maybe a segue or reference to tech correction in terms of regulation, because what a difference that is to see Europe telling Apple, which I think may still be the company with the most cash on hand in the whole world. I mean, they were at some point. I don't know if that's changed. Anyway, huge tech company. And for European governments to say, hey, you need to change your standard now to this. I think it sounds like a win for consumers, but that is a really, really big difference from what we see in the United States. So, obviously people have lots of opinions about this, but I think Europe has been ahead of us in the United States with regard to privacy law. I'm not saying that the GDPR, the General Directive on Privacy Regulation, is perfect and without flaw or blemish, but I am comfortable saying that we need to have privacy protections written into our laws and not just leave it up to the good graces of technology companies to try and protect us as best they can. And I think this is I personally, this is just Wes, see this as a positive from the consumer standpoint that Europe is trying to accelerate the move to USB-C. There have been some really interesting things that have happened throughout time with regard to standards. We have a different television standard for Europe than we do for the United States. We've had, electrical standards, those of us that have traveled internationally, and you've got these different plugs and things like that. And in some cases, that was designed incompatibility because somebody thought they were going to be able to benefit in this market by not, being able to just get it from over here and having to produce it, differently. So anyway, I think that it's a win for consumers, it seems like, internationally. And so it'll be interesting to see how long it lasts, right? Because USB-C is a fast technology in terms of transfer, and it's very flexible because you can have power as well as data transfer on it. But it'll be interesting to see, what its lifespan is. How many years is it going to be until, it's eclipsed? We've had USB-A for a long time. So, if it has a run anywhere comparable to USB-A, that'll be a long run.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's see. And then one other kind of, actually maybe two more that we can talk about today in regards to, there's three more actually I want to talk about today in regards to Apple. The first one is, this is an article from a couple weeks back, but 95Mac reported that there is some kind of evidence that Apple might be working on an e-ink screen, and there is a white paper that's going around that suggests that Apple is testing e-ink screens for inclusion in future foldable devices and other tablet-like applications. And for me, I really love e-ink as a technology, and one of the reasons why is because I've played with an Android tablet that had e-ink on it, and e-ink is not very responsive. If you ever own a Kindle, a black and white Kindle, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it has screens that that have barely any draw, and that's really what brings down your battery. Oftentimes on a tablet or a phone, you can go for days and days and days and days and days, and your screen is staying off, even if there is applications going on in the background. But if you use your phone, right, by use it, I mean you're looking at your screen, you're looking at your tablet, you're looking at your laptop, especially if you have your screen in the brightest settings, it's really going to nuke your battery to be able to do that with any sort of appreciable amount of time. So if Apple can come up with novel ways to either keep a partial screen on or a part of your device on, or even have a kind of a low power mode that utilizes e-ink, that's something that's extremely tempting to me. There have been 4 or 5 attempts at e-ink phones. The problem with all of them was that they were running on Android, but weren't official Android devices, which means they didn't have the Play Store on them. So it was nearly impossible to install the kind of apps that I would need on a daily basis to be able to do my job. But still, fascinating technology.
I was listening to iOS Today, which is a Twit Network podcast, and this was maybe a week or so back when they were talking about WWDC, but they happened to mention the rumor of Apple developing an always-on iPhone screen technology, kind of like the watch, right? I've got a Generation 3 Apple Watch. I tap it, it comes on. But I don't know if that happened with 6 or if it was 5, but later generations, they don't have to go off. They can just stay on. And so Apple's, getting more mileage out of their battery, and then just, being able to conserve energy and stretch things a lot further. So that would be really interesting to see e-ink come to the iPhone. I know that one of the reasons my wife and I, and this summer day was an example, because she was out, in the backyard reading on her Kindle, is that, man, the iPad just, we were in the 90s today. It was mid to low 90s, but still, it gets so hot. Hey, we got Peggy George in the house, and she's in Phoenix. I mean, it can really, really get hot to the point where the iPad or the phone will completely shut down.
Yeah.
And you'll just have to go put it in air conditioning and plug it in, and it'll finally come back to life. But anyway, the Kindle is absolutely wonderful for that with e-ink, and it'll be interesting to see, how that comes. That article talks about a possible foldable iPhone at some point, and that the use of e-ink may help with the display of some things that, again, those might just be persistent and be on all the time. And certainly if you're going to have something on all the time, e-ink is a compelling technology to be utilizing versus OLED or, these other screen technologies.
Yep, totally. Okay, a couple other articles. One I'll just give a quick shout out to. Today's 9 to 5 Mac had some early benchmark of the M2 chip in comparison to the M1 chip. M1 and M2 are really the consumer level chips, because the other thing we know now is that Apple seems to be setting up the chip as the minimum, and then there are Pro and Ultra chipsets that are available that are intended to be for power users. So far, my general experience has been that the M1 core chip, which again is supposedly the consumer level chip, is just fine at providing great speed at a good price. But it looks like about a 10% 10% performance boost, up to a 20% performance boost, depending on which part of speed you're looking at. There's lots of ways to measure speed on a computer, so I thought that was interesting news. And then the last one that I think is actually, it's an example of a problem that Apple has in the way it does things. This is from 9 to 5 Mac on June 14th, and it talks about Stage Manager and the controversy that is surrounding that. And Stage Manager was something announced at WWDC, the developer conference last week. And it has to do with the opportunity to multitask in the iPad operating system. And the idea behind Stage Manager is that you can, I think it's a gesture you can utilize on the screen that opens up a multi-screen interface that allows you to bring other screens in or go to 2 screens at once to essentially manage your windows. And if you are familiar with some of the keyboard commands about flipping through windows or flipping through applications, it's a very elegant screen that allows you to do that. And again, it's called Stage Manager. one of the things that was announced last week was that this would be for new devices only, and also ones that have the M1 chip, which is really limited to 2021 iPad Pros. Or actually, I guess it would be 2021 iPad Pros and 2022 iPad Airs, including the one that I have right now. I might note, and it's just super interesting to me that they decided to go in this direction. And there's been a lot of debate about this, but I will also note, and I won't mention the reason why it's another kind of wacky Neiffer project, but I happen to know also that the newest version of the Mac operating system released later this year, which I believe is called Ventura. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, OS 10 Ventura is coming out later this year, and it drops every it drops every do I have that right? It is. Every trash can Mac is dropped from support for that, which means the trash can Macs, which were the Mac Pros from 2013 to 2000, it was either 16 or 17, relatively recent releases, aren't going to be supported by that operating system. And a lot of people aren't surprised from the standpoint that people do believe that Apple's going to try to get rid of the need to keep Intel-based operating systems in play for some time, or for the near future, so they can decrease the number of operating systems they're ultimately supporting with updates. But a lot of Mac users are pretty disappointed in this decision, in part because of the complexities of Apple's long history of supporting devices well after they're purchased. And in fact, we've got an old iPad Air, or no, I'm sorry, a MacBook Air at work that's one of our test machines that I believe is a 2014 device. That's an 8-year-old MacBook that's still receiving updates from modern operating systems.
I am on a 27-inch iMac right now that is a late 2012 model, and I'm running Mac OS Catalina. This has got, I just pulled up the About This Mac. It's got 8 gigs of RAM. It has a 2.9 gigahertz Intel Core i5. It does great for me, but it isn't going to go forever. And I kind of think I may be at the operating system limit here. So this is something that happens with all modern hardware. You get to a point where the manufacturer does not continue to support it. And so, as you mentioned, as we talked about on the show, Apple's extremely generous. I don't think Apple's going to pull a Microsoft and say, your Safari no longer works, rendering the computer. I mean, if you couldn't put another browser on it, I mean, you can, but anyway, that has not happened, but interesting. And it also just points to, with schools, we have to be looking at our refresh cycles, and we've got to, build that into our budgets, not only with, student one-to-one devices, but, faculty staff devices. And, if you still have labs, or you've got computers in offices, obviously, that staff are using, and you've got, in some cases, still carts and things like that. It depends, but can't hold on to things forever, and you've got to be updating them, and the companies are going to continue to push that kind of a refresh. And at some point, you're gonna reach end of life, and you're just going to have to bite the bullet. But you probably don't want to wait for that point, because that's going to be a long way in the future. So in some cases, though, like this nice 27-inch iMac I'm using, which I bought from our school when they were getting rid of it, it works great. So for now, I would of course love to have multiple large screens like Dr. Neiffer running a new Mac Mini, but at this point, this is working good. But I'm certainly aware that operating system can't be updated anymore, and it's possible that there are some security vulnerabilities out there that are not going to be patched, and so you put yourself as well as your network and others at danger and risk if you end up persisting in, using that old system past its end of life.
Totally. Okay, and I think that's it for there. So shall we?
Let's do the software one before we do tech correction. I think
Okay, sure.
that'll round out. Yeah, go for it.
Chrome Unboxed has a story about Adobe Photoshop. There is a web-based version of Adobe Photoshop that I've read has received some pretty decent reviews. Works well even on relatively modest browsers, but the Chrome Unboxed reported today that Adobe has announced that Photoshop for the web will soon be available for everyone. And my understanding is that everyone truly means everyone, and not just people with Adobe Creative Cloud subscriptions. And there was a kind of a long bit of discussion from Chrome Unboxed, but I've seen some other media on this today that Adobe, for a long time had been increasing the price on their Creative Cloud subscriptions, and including stopping support of versions of the Creative Suite. In some cases going back to CS2, which would be a 12, 13, 14-year-old piece of software, but still worked just fine on Windows 7. Despite being a dated piece of software, that they had stopped support for that, in part because they were looking to shore up their monthly user base to continue to create profits, despite the fact that there were a lot of industry alternatives. And what I would suppose is that there are other web-based tools that may have ate into Adobe's lunch a little bit. One of the prominent ones, for example, is Pixlr, which is a pretty decent image editor online, even though it lacks some of the advanced functionality as it relates to things like being able to manage files locally. It does an okay, not great job of all those pieces. But I want to mention this because if you are a Chrome user, I think this is really great news. If you're a district that can't really afford Photoshop, I believe that students will need to create accounts. So that can be a little problematic in itself, but I would assume that in the same way that Adobe allows schools to sign up for Adobe Express, which was previously a set of tools that was under a different name, the same will be true also of Photoshop, that they will try to get schools set up to where they can just single sign on from a Google or an Office 365 sign-on system.
A couple things come to mind for this. First off, the last time I owned Adobe Photoshop was pre-2006 when I was at the College of Ed at Texas Tech. And I mean, it was a big old box, and I think even educationally, I mean, it was hundreds of dollars. Certainly the commercial license was super expensive. But you get the educational license, but this is a real sign of the times of where we've gone in terms of the maturity of the web and also access to software. And I'll say the utility of Chromebooks and just the utility of the browser, right? We have a new in the second year of an art and technology class that's a collaboration. This is at my former school now, between our 7th and 8th grade computer and makerspace teacher, and then our art teacher, called Art and Technology, and really innovative, great multidisciplinary projects, but for the most part, all handled without any problems on student Chromebooks. They have a Mac lab and they're able to do some things, but you really didn't need to because the web has matured so much. And like you said, Pixlr, I think there's a Pixlr X, which is a even fancier version. And, it's just awesome to be able to use those tools. And I will throw this in part because I feel so guilty that I did such a poor job getting my own links in tonight. But one of the websites that I built at Cassidy, as I helped for really the last 5 years, I think, our senior English teacher with a wonderful class where students wrote children's picture books, and then they used Book Creator, created printable versions, but then also electronic versions that they recorded their voices and all this. The link I just dropped into the chat, which I'll include, is our student authors page, and there's an image editing page, which includes, in addition to Pixlr X image editor online, Remove BG, which is a really nice tool for removing background. There's a link to get to Adobe Creative Cloud. There's also, and this, I don't think we had to do it this year for Book Creator, but iPhones now shoot a native format called HEIC, and Book Creator was requiring JPEG, and so anyway, you had to convert those. But almost anything that you want to do today in terms of media and production, you can do a pretty decent job with it using web tools. I'm sure there's going to be videographers that are going to argue with me and say WeVideos, of course it's not Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere, but excellent, and very exciting. And again, I think this points to, if you are not leveraging that power of the Chromebook, and especially the kinds of management that Google allows in their admin console for students, this is it's fantastic to be able to do that. / end of rant. Shall we talk about the tech correction? We've gone through 40 minutes, Dr. Neiffer. We aren't even going to spend half the time talking about the tech correction.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I'm sure the number of these will just suck us right into some discussions. I guess I'll just throw down a quick funny one. Apparently, Bill Gates has no interest in NFTs, and as The Verge reported today, Bill Gates says that 100% of NFT value is based on greater fool theory, which is the simple concept that something is only worth as much as someone is willing to pay for it. In the case of NFTs, if you want to profit off of them, if you buy NFTs and want to make a profit off of them, then the best way to do that is to find a bigger fool than you are to be able to do that. And of course, that's a pretty stunning statement. I will admit that I still don't really understand NFTs enough to either give credence to Mr. Gates's theory, or I know plenty of people that are legit creators that are pretty down on NFTs. I should say are up on NFTs that are in that space and talking about how potentially they're an incredible part of the future of maintaining rights for content creators. But Bill Gates, not a fan. So any thoughts about that, sir?
Did you ever watch that video I put as a Geek of the Week in episode 260 by Dan Olson? The line goes up, the problem with NFTs.
Yes.
Okay. I think, and I watched like half of that. It's a fairly long video, but that podcast, I have a link to that podcast by Ezra Klein. I can link to that again here if you go back. Our latest episode right now that was published was 260. I think that episode and that analysis, it was really, really persuasive, and he echoes Gates, because what he says is these are people who are saying cryptocurrency is so confusing, it's so complicated, you won't be able to figure it out. But ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful. It's going to solve all our problems, and it's going to be this wonderful transformative technology that's going to liberate us from the overlords of central banks and central governments and all this. And what he explains is that it's basically a scam, because certainly power users of social media like Elon Musk can simply tweet some things and get some people excited, and oh my gosh, look how much money that we've made. And so it's basically ephemeral. And the point that he makes about NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, for those of you that may not have tracked with this before, and it's supposed to be a digital representation of something else. Like, oh, you now own this slam dunk that or whatever, this 3-point shot that Larry Bird scored in this particular game. And what Olson explains in that podcast and also in the video is that, the idea of money, we need something concrete to associate with money. We used to have a gold standard for money. We don't have a gold standard anymore in the United States. It really is just trusting the government of the United States. But with NFTs, people couldn't just, they created it so that they'd be able to draw more people into cryptocurrency and into this whole arena. So I really wasn't on the fence about cryptocurrency. I was definitely thinking that we need to address it in schools, talking about economics, because it seems to be such a big driver. But I don't think at this point that it's going to be the earth-shattering, world-changing technology. And blockchain has good utility and uses, but I don't think it's going to be turning the world upside down. And you certainly don't want to be putting your retirement savings into cryptocurrency. I'll just conclude with that. So
yeah. Well, and for the record, we've talked about my long history with Dogecoin, and although I am still up on Dogecoin long term, I have lost an awful lot of value in, say, the last 2 weeks, and then the previous year and a half. So luckily, I did not put my retirement savings into there. It was really some resources I did not need at the time, and good because it went up and then it went down. So.
And Bill Gates is a pretty smart person. So, but of course, he recommended that people get vaccinated, and a lot of folks, thought he was foolish for saying that.
Yeah, totally.
People are not going to all agree, but it's when somebody like that says something like that, it's worth paying attention to, I think.
Okay, there's another article that I actually had in last week that I want to spend a little more time on, and we'll see where it goes from here. But this is from Time Magazine. It's recent 2030 episode. Their 2030 special magazine edition that has articles kind of looking into the future, and it talked about this notion that let me start off with the story. It starts off with that in 1983. A Croatian commercial airliner wandered into Soviet airspace where it was shot, and 269 people were killed. And I didn't know this story, but to prevent this tragedy from happening again, President Ronald Reagan took a bold step and ordered the U.S. military to make the then new global positioning system available to everyone, which would allow everyone to know precisely where they're located on Earth and improve things like navigation in airplanes. And ever since then, even though the global positioning system is really maintained by the military for military purposes, in other words, I would imagine they could shut off access if they wanted to, and I imagine there's also a lot of fail-safes built into that because of how many systems rely on GPS technology. But here we are in 2022, and GPS is used for everything from locating your luggage to knowing where your cell phone is at from your computer, right? You can ask your cell phone to tell you its location so you can find a lost device. And the premise of this article is the notion that all of these companies that own mountains of data on us, and they talk about things like Google, Tesla, even more mundane apps that are based on sales to people, collect an awful lot of data on you, and that data is essentially owned and proprietary. And what these authors argue is, and to quote from the article, like with other common goods such as security, justice, basic education, infrastructure, government action is needed. When it comes to access data, government action is either untested or radical. We have made data accessible when it was held by powerful corporation, and they talk about in the 1950s when they forced AT&T to open up its patents to other U.S. businesses because AT&T was stymieing trade.
Bell Labs, that was an incredible impact on innovation, the development of the web, and so many technologies.
Yep.
Huge.
So the idea there is that this data needs to be available for human purposes to help develop tools that help people and not just keep it for commercial purposes. So your thoughts, Dr. Fryer?
First off, Peggy's saying it behind a paywall. I think if you open an incognito window, Peggy, you won't have a cookie set, and I think you'll be able to read the article.
Yep.
This reminds me a little bit of zero-day exploits in the ways in which governments, as well as individuals and private companies, hoard that information and don't just turn that in to be fixed because of value that they have. This is the heart of the tech correction and surveillance capitalism, right? Surveillance capitalism functions because we don't really have any legislation or constitutional amendments or anything that limit the ability for individuals and companies or governments to collect vast troves of information about us and do almost anything that they want with that data. And I think we've talked about on the show, I've read some authors that have said it's not a great analogy to say, data is the new oil. That's imperfect in many ways, but it certainly undergirds much of the modern internet and the modern web. And there are some really, there's some really negative aspects to that kind of a model. There's positives as well. So does the article suggest, or do you, Dr. Neiffer, have a solution or a path forward where we can have big data, or big tech not hoard that data to a degree, and this could be changed? Is privacy regulation a way forward, empowering individuals perhaps to have the ability to take their data and have portability, being able to move it places? Or any thoughts on a path forward from where we are with this?
Well, I do think regulations are a big part of this, and that is certainly what the authors of the article are arguing, citing several attempts in the past to regulate for the purposes of kind of the common human good, right? But I would say, yeah, I mean, part of this is that we need to find a way to fund the internet without personal data being the primary currency. And that obviously is very problematic, because a lot of the free web trades in private data in order to support targeted advertising. So obviously that's a bit problematic, but I think that absolutely needs to be the way we think about this, because I just don't think we have any other shot here. That a good example is traffic data. I would guess that if you dig deep down into the Apple Maps, the Google Maps, and the Waze terms of service, that they're collecting an awful lot of data on you to make that happen, and not sharing that data with anyone except to sell advertising or to otherwise create advertising models for you.
And municipalities, cities and towns are doing this too. I notice this the most when we go north into Edmond, which is one of our affluent suburbs. We have them ringing Oklahoma City, and we have a lot of turnpikes. I don't know if you guys have those in Montana, but we have a lot of turnpikes in Oklahoma as well as Texas. I say a lot. I mean, I end up having to use them quite a bit. The Pike Pass is what we call it. Texas has I think the Texas toll tag, but almost not everyone, a lot of people have these now. And so it's not just when you're on the turnpike or on the interstate. Our school uses those now to be able to allow faculty and staff and students and parents to be able to come in and recognize their vehicle. But I've been told that there's a ton of data collection that's happening in cities and towns, not just from cameras, but from these I guess passive receivers that are able to pick up your tag, your turnpike tag signal. And then this data is, fed into dashboards and stuff. It's kind of incredible, everything that's being collected and the ways that these lines are drawn. And one of the things that makes me think of as an academic with a terminal degree is, universities have always been and continue to be very protective of data. We have things called IRBs, which are institutional review boards, that say when you're going to do a study, then you've got to submit your process and make sure you're protecting individual privacy and confidentiality, yada, yada, yada. There are no IRB review processes for a new surveillance system that I know of that's being put in, or a new turnpike metering system. We used to have actual toll booths in Oklahoma, and those now have gone the way of Texas, which is it's all completely passive. It either gets your little, it's not RFID, but it's whatever your tag is, or the AI photographic recognition takes a picture of your license plate and then connects your license plate to your name and then sends you a bill. So it strikes me how important these issues are. Where are we talking about these in school? Where are we talking about this in the curriculum? I mean, is it even in a civics curriculum or a U.S. government curriculum? It's not in an English curriculum. Math doesn't have it. I think that hopefully we're talking about it in a media literacy curriculum and when we have a quote computer class or computer applications, but these are absolutely essential topics to discuss and understand, because it does undergird the entire modern economy of the web, and it has so many different impacts, politically, culturally, socially. So to me, it just screams, where are we helping get our heads around this formally as educators, as citizens, and then, for the students that are in our classrooms, because this is really important stuff. And I don't think it's in the curriculum formally.
Yeah, I both agree that it should be, and then agree it's not really at all. Okay, let's see here.
How about the TikTok algorithm one? You want to do that?
That's actually the one I was going to look at. So this one is a kind of breaking news that this was covered on several outlets today, but there's apparently been a release of of some internal information to suggest that Facebook is looking at kind of reconfiguring the way they do things, and they want the app's feed to look more like TikTok's feed. And there is a lot of debate inside the article itself about exactly what that might look like. It's not just the concept of replacing the content with shorts, which is what YouTube calls it, or Reels, which is called Instagram calls it, to try to be competitive with the TikTok model. In fact, I did see an article, I didn't put it in, that about 1.3 billion YouTube users use Shorts now. I can't imagine that it's universally platform accessed by those users. I would imagine I'm a Shorts user under that definition, and I've maybe seen 4 or 5 of them. I still go back to TikTok for TikTok itself. But I think this is a sign that Facebook is concerned that they're losing the logarithm race to other platforms. And the reason why this is so interesting to me is because if this is true, it feels like Facebook doesn't get that there's some danger in these particular software manifestations of being as effective as they are, because they help that they in essence radicalize you, right? By delivering things it thinks you want to see next as part of a progression. It's just what got Facebook into trouble in the last 5 or 6 years in the first place. So, Wes, I know that you're relatively new to TikTok and that you are a TikTok creator, as a matter of fact. But any thoughts on bringing this technology to Facebook?
Oh my gosh. It's just, at one level, it's just depressing to see how it appears to be how unregulatable this is. I don't know. I haven't tracked to see if we're going to pass any kind of gun control legislation in the country after Uvalde. We have such gridlock in the country, but it just really it really seems like we're frozen in so many different things. And when it comes to technology and these kind of things and how quickly it changes, imagining that our congressional folks are going to have enough consensus to pass some kind of legislation that can address something like this, I just don't think they're going to. So yeah, Facebook's going to continue to chase. If they can't buy them, they're going to continue to steal and copy, whatever appears to succeed with the young generation, because that's part of what's happening, right? Because eventually, if Facebook they did buy Instagram, but if they're not able to buy some of these other platforms and they can't become the cool platform for the young people, then the Facebook user base is going to age out. We're going to all die off at some point. So I'm glad that this was leaked. I think this points to the need for some transparency, some algorithmic transparency. And I'll give a shout out to Ethan Zuckerman, who has a great podcast on fixing the internet. And I think I've included him in a Geek of the Week before, but there's so much opacity. There's so much that we can't really see and look into. And I think when it comes to this, algorithmic bias, did you see that YouTube special on algorithmic bias? We mentioned it a few weeks ago. I need to put that on.
I watched the first part of it. I think it's still on my queue to review.
Okay, I have not seen it yet, and I need to. We've seen Top Gun twice, of course, but I haven't seen that one yet on Netflix, and I want to do that actually with Shelly and probably with both of our girls too, because it's important. So how are we going to be able to even know the landscape of what's happening with these algorithms? We're going to need probably push for some greater transparency, if not for everyone, then, for certain groups that are going to be able to go in and audit and take a look at things. Just like you have groups audit, hey, how are you doing your billboard advertising? Hey, how are you doing your classified advertising? Are you, illegally, excluding certain groups or not allowing certain groups to advertise or whatever. You've got outside auditors that come in and take a look at things, and there's some regulation there. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not surprising. Sadly, I think it's also a little bit depressing. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Wes, I see that we are at the top of the hour. So shall we hit the Geeks of the Week?
Let's do it. Mine is a story. I called it the long tail moment. And so it's a Twitter thread. And if you're not familiar with the concept of the long tail, that's a great thing to just look up in Wikipedia. Basically, it means that people with a really niche interest, one interpretation of it, folks with a niche interest can connect with each other. And, sometimes that means folks get radicalized to join fringe political groups. Other times it means people who love oral history and digital storytelling in World War II, get to connect. And so I put a 4-hour video of a World War II veteran who is still alive in our former church. I'd interviewed him in 2011, and I think it only had about 46 views, but it was found by a gentleman who is named Rishi Sharma, and he's a Canadian, and he spent the past 5 years interviewing World War II veterans around the world, and he had actually interviewed Orrin Lee Peters at one time. He was trying to connect with him again. But anyway, I made a little thread sharing that story and sharing what he, a CBC News article about his work, and then also a link to his project, which is called Remember World War II. And so he is trying to get as many of the still living World War II veterans, which there are not that many still alive and not that many, able to do interviews, but as many of them to share their perspectives and their stories. And so I just thought that was super cool. And amidst the tech correction and the depressing stuff that we talk about or whatever, it's wonderful to preserve the voices and perspectives of folks that are in the older generation, and certainly people who have experienced some extraordinary things, to be inspired by them and to learn from them, and to preserve their voices and perspectives.
Okay, and I would like to share an opportunity through my friends at the Northwest Council of Computer Education. They've teamed up with the Library of Congress to offer a wonderful series of professional development events this summer around the so-called Crossroads of History project, which is how to use primary sources to develop wonderful and meaningful lessons based on issues like social justice and civil rights. And it's a free professional development. NCCE is running the western half of the United States, which, to give you some sense of what they define as West, would include North and South Dakota and Texas, but not Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. That would be covered by another region. But if you're a Western United States educator, go to ncce.org/professional learning and learn more about the Crossroads of History project from Northwest Council of Computer Education and the Library of Congress.
Sounds awesome. Well, Jason, when you're not here on a Wednesday night, where can people find you?
Hey, best place to follow me, to find me, follow me, that works too. Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach is where I'd like to make comments. And yourself, sir?
You can go to W Fryer on Twitter, and you can also just link to wesfryer.com/after, where I have a plethora of links to include my sometimes active Mastodon account, which I bet we can count on maybe two hands how many Mastodon listeners we have. But hey, if you're on Mastodon or Twitter or anything, if you're just listening to this, we would love to hear from you, hear feedback. Reach out to us, let us know. Join us live if you can. Remember that you can access all of the show notes when the Slacker post-production character who's part of this team gets his act together. Usually that happens a day or two after our show. It's all on edtechsr.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at edtechsr, subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, where you do not have to wait, because these things are immediately archived without Dr. Neiffer or I so much as raising a finger after we in the show. It just happens with text-to-speech audio transcription, which isn't that a little bit scary? But this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We want to thank you for joining us. Peggy, thank you so much for joining us live. It is always a joy. And we encourage everybody out there to stay savvy, stay safe, and join us next time for the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Good night.